4 o'clock hour, Max Olson, Thursdays, most every Thursdays at 4 o'clock from theathletic.com, college football. Max, I saw a note. 3,500 college football players are in the portal. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
3,500.
That includes walk-ons. That number would include walk-ons. So
Okay.
yeah, it's a massive number.
So, Max, what has been your biggest surprise so far when it comes to the portal, or were there any?
No big surprises so far in this spring transfer window. I don't think. The batch of players going in. The I think over 400 now in the past week or so. It's mostly backups who want to go find somewhere where they can go play. Guys who are probably coming out of spring knowing they're going to lose a position battle. There's a lot of repeat transfers who've gone to multiple schools and just haven't been able to figure it out. But there are a few premium players that go in. I think in this past week, I think the notable thing here, I mean, Jayden Rashada, the quarterback going to Georgia to go compete for the job next year. Obviously, that's pretty interesting given his history with NIL and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's right now there's a big run on defensive linemen, and I think there's a ton of teams looking to get better, especially at defensive tackle. And you're seeing not just Dominic Williams, but two really good ones from Michigan State, Tyler Barron going back in the portal from Louisville. Just a lot of impact defensive linemen who I think are in this day and age worth a lot of money, who are visiting a bunch of contenders. And I think the fight over those guys over the next week or two is going to be pretty interesting.
Max, what did you think of the whole Jaden Rashada situation? Obviously, a lot of things being sorted out at Arizona State right now, but going to Georgia, can't blame anybody for wanting to go play for the Dogs, but it's not going to be thrown right into the fire, it appears. So what do you think about just the fit and the latest saga in the chapter of a young man who we still have yet to see a whole lot of, quite frankly?
Yeah, 100%. I hope that he is going to a place where he wants to go because, when he was going through the recruiting process and really getting shopped around by an agent, he committed to Miami, he committed to Florida. You just kind of hope that he wasn't just going places because they were offering the most money. He went to Arizona State ultimately after getting out of his NLI with Florida. And, that was his dad's alma mater. You kind of figured, okay, with a new coach there, probably a pretty good fit. But Arizona State made their own decisions in terms of bringing in another transfer this offseason. And I think for Jayden Rashada, honestly, I think the move to Georgia is kind of a win-win. And that to me, the money's got nothing to do with it. I think that he has an opportunity to go there, kind of go be in the background again, kind of not have that big spotlight on him and go train behind Carson Beck and learn from Georgia's coaching staff here over the next year. And then next spring, gets to compete with Gunnar Stockton, who I think the Georgia staff is really high on. I don't think they're taking Jaden Rashada because they think that they have no options behind Carson Beck. But, I think a good opportunity to go try and win the job next spring. And if you don't, and Georgia's coaching staff is vouching for you, then as you saw with Brock Vandegrift going and becoming the starter of Kentucky, he's probably going to have great options again if he goes back in the portal. And if Georgia coaching staff really feels like this kid's good and we like him, he's done everything right, then he'll probably land in a great spot yet again if he doesn't win the job at Georgia.
Max, of that 3,500 and whatever the number ends up, because it's not even shut yet. There's another 5 days for just this spring transfer portal and then whatever else happens. How many of those 3,500 and maybe more of a percentage will end up still in the portal when the season begins, when they start working out in August?
It's a great question, and it's one that I've spent a lot of time trying to study that the past few years, just in terms of what is the real number in terms of the guys that go unsigned. And, in terms of Power 5 scholarship players going in the portal, more than 90% of those guys are going to land on teams. Mm-hmm. In terms of the overall of all of those guys, it's definitely more than 80%, closer to 85%, at least it was in the last cycle. And look, there are going to be some guys in that group who withdraw from the portal. There's going to be some that go pro. There's going to be some that had the extra year, but were, kind of just threw their name in there just to see if anybody bites, but they were already, done playing football. So everyone's kind of got their own reasons, but there are certainly a lot of players, especially these guys that have bounced around to a couple schools, that just will not have an opportunity to be a scholarship player FBS, FCS, whatever next year. And, that's always a shame to see. So you hope that as those numbers keep going up every year, and these schools have more roster flexibility, you hope that number of unsigned guys doesn't keep going up all the time as well.
Max, we've heard a couple comments from Greg Sankey and a couple different stories this week. Do you think that the alliance between the Big Ten, Pac-12, and ACC maybe pushed Greg Sankey into his villain era, where had maybe they just gone along with the playoff beforehand, he wouldn't be, just unilaterally doing SEC stuff right now?
It's very interesting. I mean, I think, I thought Ross Dellinger's piece was very interesting when you kind of lay out, all the facts in terms of how we got here. I mean, obviously the question of what were the specifics on the deal that was on the table that the alliance pushed back on. I mean, that's obviously still kind of missing in this whole equation here a little bit. But I think that the SEC has been very effective here at operating and navigating kind of through these past few years of they took Texas and Oklahoma, and I'm sure that they could take more schools in the future. But I think generally Greg Sankey likes to throw up his hands and say, hey, I'm not the one doing all this stuff. I'm just, it's everybody else making these moves and things like that, and we just have to defend our position. And I think he's been pretty effective at that. And I think that ultimately, like, the thing that I was always skeptical, and I probably said on the show, was, okay, when it was time for this last TV deal, were the Big Ten and SEC really going to pull out of the playoff and do their own playoff? Like, what did that actually look like? I understand that those guys could say after the fact, yeah, that was definitely an option for us, but that's the kind of move that I think you get the villain label for sure if you do something like that. So I think they're kind of trying to walk a fine line here of having all the power and trying to be very influential in all the decisions, but maybe not wanting the blame for some of the consequences too.
Speaking of polarizing figures in college sports, you've had to write a lot about Colorado because of all the portal entries. I mean, you have a part-time job just keeping up with Colorado's in and outs on the roster right now. Max, Deion obviously has his fans and he has his haters. Not asking you where you fall in that, but where do you fall in kind of the explanation that's been given and just sort of the feel of what's going on there right now when it comes to all of the fluctuation of that roster and the portal and how it's being used, how they're spinning it, and so forth?
Yeah, so we're at 32 scholarship players leaving since the end of the season. Obviously, Dylan Edwards, the talented running back, being the 32nd. I think that, if you understand that the only thing that Deion Sanders and his staff are focused on is being as successful as possible in the 2024 season, when this is, we would assume the last year they have Shedeur Sanders, the last year they have Travis Hunter, guys that they really believe are first round players. Then I think that, the decision making in terms of the roster management, I think kind of falls in line with that. I think the actions don't necessarily reflect here's like a 4-year plan we've got going on here. This is about how do we get good as quickly as possible. And so last year you dump all the players you inherited and replace them with transfers because you wanted to get more experience and you thought they were better than guys off a 1-11 team. Now this offseason, those guys you brought in, a lot of them don't want to be backups anymore and they want to move on, or Colorado wasn't exactly what they were looking for. And I think when you lose a guy like Dylan Edwards, that's probably a little bit more surprising. Like, that's one of the few guys that you probably say, wow, they didn't want to lose that guy. But I think for the most part, I think Deion Sanders is pretty comfortable with saying, okay, if you don't want to be here, we can get a similar player in the portal because, I think they have some experience in doing that now. So can they ultimately get like a really talented 50-man roster out of their 85 this fall? I think that is how they're approaching this. And, that's going to require money in terms of NIL to win big recruiting battles. It's going to require great evaluation. And, we'll obviously they got better last year, but we'll see if that all adds up to them actually being, pretty consistently competitive in the Big 12. I don't know.
Max, and I know you got to go, but with Dylan Edwards, was that expected from your point of view? And then also on top of that, did he leave because Ohio State had a running back transfer in?
I don't think Dylan Edwards has come out and said why exactly he's looking to transfer. I think you saw the moves that were going on. I mean, everybody else in their running back room had hit the portal. They lost Anthony Hickson, Oregon State. They lost Alton McCaskill, who obviously was unhappy that he, didn't have a role in their run game last year. They lost Sideon Wilkerson, who's another back for them. Cavazier Smoak went pro. So, Dylan Edwards was really the only guy left there. You can't really say Dylan Edwards wasn't going to get the ball as much as he wanted to if he stayed at Colorado. I think they were pretty intent on building a pretty big offensive package for Dylan Edwards. So, I think that certainly he's going to have great options in the portal, whether it's going to a school like Kansas State where he's got a lot of ties, or it's going to, a real playoff contender. But no, I did not expect Dylan Edwards to go in. I think that's one of the guys that they feel like is, to use Coach Prime's language, I think they feel like he's a dog and one of the few dogs they have. And I don't think they wanted him to go by any.
All right, Max, the long national nightmare is over. How do you feel about Reggie Bush getting his Heisman Trophy back?
Hey, pretty cool. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I think that he had to wait a long time and put up a long fight for that. But I think it's fair to say the current rules, the current context of where this sport is at makes his thing look different. And it's fine by me. I think guys like that should still be able to come to the ceremony and have their trophy.
Max, thank you, buddy. As always, we know you're locked in with 3,500 and whatever else it might end up being with 5 days to go. Max Olson, theathletic.com. Think about that.